Hello everyone, Lori Spencer here. Welcome back to Who Killed Bobby Kennedy, an investigative true crime series exploring the murder of Senator Robert F. Kennedy in 1968 and the trial of his convicted killer, Sirhan Sirhan. Please take a moment to subscribe to my channel if you're not already, smash that like button, and share the playlist link, which is down in the comments section, with anyone that you think might find this series interesting so that they can listen to every episode back to back. Producing this series involved 35 years of research, 7 months of interviews, endless hours of editing, and a lot of reading government documents, which can be tedious at times. It's a ton of hard work, and I do it for free as a labor of love. My only reward is sharing knowledge with the public and the kind comments that I receive from viewers like you. So if you'd like to support my efforts with a donation, it would be very much appreciated. Check out my wish list at giftapp.com/real-Lori-Spencer, where you can select a book that you'd like me to consider for a future book club reading. There are lots of great Kennedy family history books there to choose from. You can also buy me a coffee or visit patreon.com/Lori-Spencer. So far, this series has 13 episodes, and I thought the story was complete when we wrapped production last year. I felt satisfied at the time that I'd reported everything you'd ever want to know about the RFK assassination, but that was before President Donald Trump signed an executive order on January 23rd, 2025, commanding federal agencies to release all of their files on the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It took another 3 months after the signing of that executive order for the long-awaited RFK files to actually be released, the first tranche of them anyway. On April 18th, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard announced the release of the first 10,000 pages, and of course, I couldn't wait to dive in. It took about 3 weeks for me to plow through all 10,085 pages to be exact. And in this new episode of the series, episode 14, I'll show you what I found in those dusty old file boxes and share with you what, if any, new light these documents shed on this historic murder case. I've selected a couple hundred of the most interesting documents, and I'm just going to walk you through them in this episode one by one. If you're listening to this podcast on an audio-only podcast platform like Spotify, I might recommend watching the video version instead over on my YouTube, Rumble, or on my Substack so that you can actually see the pages as I put them on the screen. We will be moving through these fairly quickly, so at times you might want to pause the video if you want a closer look at a specific document. I will also put down in the comments section a thread that I posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, that contains screenshots of every document you see here in this video. That might help you zero in on exactly the file you want without endlessly searching the internet for a copy of it. Of course, you can browse through and download all of the 10,000 RFK files yourself at archives.gov/RFK. That's archives.gov/RFK. As far as redactions go, these files so far are totally unredacted, and that is a triumph for historians and researchers like me who have waited decades for fully unredacted versions of some key documents. Going through these, the only things I've seen in the files that are redacted are things like social security numbers and other personally identifying information on living persons, who of course would be protected by privacy laws. One other important thing that I should probably explain before we get started. Of these 10,000 pages that were just posted, not all of these documents are new. I'd say that at least half of these files are actually just duplicates of documents that have already been public for 35 years. Since the California State Archives finally opened their case files back in 1988, a lot of these pages that we're now finding in the National Archives are just file copies that were sent to the FBI from the Los Angeles Police Department, the LA District Attorney, and the courts before and during Sirhan's 1969 trial. Many of these documents are certainly not new to experienced RFK assassination researchers, but some of them might be new to you if you've never seen them before. And each page tells a fascinating story about this tragic murder of President Kennedy's brother. Such a turbulent time in American history of riots, protests, and assassinations at home, wars overseas in Vietnam and the Middle East, the latter of which drove Sirhan to martyr himself for the Palestinian cause by killing Senator Kennedy over his support for Israel. Sirhan's mother, Mary, once called the assassination of RFK a patriotic act. The documents that are new, that the public has never seen before, are boxes of files from the White House, the Department of Justice, and the State Department. Because these federal agencies were not connected in any way to Sirhan's prosecution, in 1968, murdering a presidential candidate was not a federal crime. It was a state crime, and thus the federal government was largely uninvolved in the case itself. The FBI did assist the LAPD in the initial investigation at the LAPD's request, which is why we have some overlap and duplicates of FBI files from the California State Archives collection. I realize that might be a bit confusing if you're not expert level in the RFK case, but hey, if you've watched 13 episodes of this series so far, you're almost an expert already. You're well informed, you're armed with plenty of knowledge to help you understand the context and assess the importance of these new RFK file releases. Hopefully, this brief introduction clears up the difference between what is new and what was previously available. And if you have any questions about the documents covered here or the RFK files in general, just drop me a comment down below. Of course, the most frequently asked question I've been getting lately is, well, are there any smoking guns in these new RFK files? Are there any proofs of a conspiracy or not? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that once you've watched this episode and looked at these documents for yourself. As I've said throughout the entire Who Killed Bobby Kennedy series, my job as a journalist and a historian is just to present the evidence and let the viewers decide, because ultimately you, the people, are the jury. And now, let's open up those file boxes that have been sitting in a federal storage facility somewhere in Maryland collecting dust for 57 years and take a look inside, shall we? So let's start here. This is just a letter from a concerned citizen to the Attorney General of the United States under LBJ, Ramsey Clark. It's dated June 6, 1968. That is the day RFK died, urging him to investigate Sirhan's potential ties to Palestinian terrorist organizations. This is a really interesting letter. It just jumped out at me because this person, even though it's, the trauma is fresh and Americans are still trying to gather all the facts about the alleged accused assassin, and this person really seems to understand the bigger picture of what's going on that would take most Americans years to figure out. It reads, "Dear Sir, it is my earnest belief that the security of our country is directly involved in the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy, and that these security interests require a thorough interrogation of the suspect, Bishara Sirhan, by you and your staff. I base my contention on the following considerations. First, Sirhan is quoted as shouting at the time of the shooting, 'I did it for my country.' Since he has never become a citizen of the United States, his loyalty is obviously directed elsewhere. Second, $400 was found in his possession at the time of his capture, a sum that strongly suggests that he had been subsidized. Third, a woman in a polka dot dress was seen in his company prior to the shooting, and afterward she is said to have boasted of the crime. Fourth, Fedayeen, guerrilla units, have sprung up in great numbers throughout Jordan, and their raids into Israel have multiplied. Since these activities have been amply financed by the oil-producing states, the possibility of an international Arab conspiracy cannot be dismissed out of hand. Holding the key to this mystery is the prisoner, Sirhan. Certainly he must not be allowed to carry such crucial secrets to his grave as Lee Harvey Oswald did. Certainly the United States, which has already lost so much at his hands, dare not risk losing more of its valued leaders through the failure of extracting from Sirhan all that he knows. This part's kind of interesting. I believe that hypnotic drugs such as sodium pentothal should be administered to facilitate the eliciting of information. If this information is withheld from the courts but used instead as a means for apprehending collaborators, if they exist, the prosecution against him should not be hampered or prejudiced in any way. He concludes other lives may well depend on how competently the security aspect of this case is conducted. Do you not agree that such a critical matter requires your personal attention? Sincerely yours, Mark Flamenhoft in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Also in the files are several pages from Sirhan's personal diaries. Several entries in his diary, made over about a year-long period, are about his desire to kill certain politicians because of their support for Israel. He had it in his mind that he was going to kill President Lyndon Johnson over the Six-Day War, and also UN Ambassador Arthur Goldberg before he finally zeroed in on Kennedy. And I'm just going to read you an excerpt from this page that's kind of interesting. It says, I advocate the overthrow of the current president of the fucking United States of America. I have no absolute plans yet, but will soon compose some. And he goes on to write, I believe that the U.S. is already in decline. Not that it hasn't. It began on November 23rd, 1963. He's obviously referring to the assassination of President Kennedy there, but he got the date wrong. It was November 22nd, not November 23rd. He writes, he goes on to say, I firmly support the communist cause and its people, whether Russian, Chinese, etc. Immediately after the assassination in June of 1968, Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, sent out a call across the Arab world asking Arab lawyers to come forward and defend Sirhan. One such lawyer was Libyan Mahmoud Nafi, who offered his services. This telegram from the State Department shows, of course, that the State Department was watching all of this very, very closely. This one is from the embassy in Tripoli to the Secretary of State in Washington and copied to U.S. embassies in Amman, Jordan, and in Benghazi. As Robert F. Kennedy lay comatose in a hospital on June 5th, 1968, still alive but just barely, the fifth grade class of a New York elementary school wrote this letter to President Lyndon Johnson, who was a former school teacher himself, saying that giving presidential candidates Secret Service protection wasn't the solution. Harsh criminal justice was. Of course, President Johnson, just the day before, as soon as Robert Kennedy was shot, he signed an executive order guaranteeing Secret Service protection to all presidential candidates on the campaign trail for the very first time. Unfortunately, as you probably know, at the time of Senator Kennedy's murder, he did not have Secret Service protection. So Lyndon Johnson removed that barrier by executive order, and then Congress later codified that into law. A few days later, on June 9th, Mrs. James Esposito of Tulsa, Oklahoma, wrote this letter to President Johnson. This is just 3 days after RFK's death, urging swift justice for Sirhan. And, she's expressing her frustration with LBJ's apparent tolerance, she says, for riots and arson and looting and violence and lawlessness on the streets. and closes her letter saying, "My son is fighting in Vietnam, trying to keep our country safe for democracy. I hope he and the others are not over there fighting in vain." And these files are so interesting, the White House correspondence files, just to get the feeling of the American people, how the anger, the rage, the confusion, the suspicions of a conspiracy, it's all there literally on the day that Bobby died, and in the days and weeks after that. The White House was just flooded with letters, and many of them were written by small children, which are just amazing to read, and I'm going to share some of those with you as we go today. As Senator Kennedy lay dying in the hospital on June 5th, a group of concerned citizens sent this telegram to Attorney General Ramsey Clark expressing their outrage. Quote, "Please do not try to tell the American public there is no evidence of a conspiracy in the attempted assassination of Robert Kennedy when you haven't even had time to investigate. You should assume there is a conspiracy in all of these assassinations until proven otherwise. The great and numerous middle-class people in this country are aroused to protest the lawlessness and the violence rampant in this country. They say minority groups are running the country because men in high places evidently do not have the intestinal fortitude to stand for what's right." And what we're looking at here, there are several reports like this in the files because the FBI was assisting the LAPD in the early days of the investigation. They would periodically send reports back to headquarters in Washington, just keeping them abreast of what's going on in the investigation. So this is a June 24th, 1968 FBI memo providing updates on the case. And also, this is interesting that apparently Sirhan's attorney was requesting police protection after receiving some threatening phone calls from the Sirhan Clemency Committee, allegedly an Arab militia. As mentioned previously, 20-year-old Sandra Serrano appeared on television shortly after Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot and claimed that immediately after the shooting, a woman in a polka dot dress ran past her shouting, "We shot him, we shot him." According to Miss Serrano, this woman had entered the Ambassador Hotel prior to the shooting, accompanied by two men, one of whom she identified as Sirhan Bishara Sirhan. Extensive investigation has failed to substantiate her story. It goes on. On June 21st, 1968, after being afforded a polygraph examination and an extensive interview by the Los Angeles, California Police Department, Miss Serrano admitted that her story was a complete fabrication. Also, down at the bottom of the memo, it says, the receptionist at the office of Russell E. Parsons, Sirhan's attorney in Los Angeles, received 2 telephone calls on June 20th from a person claiming to be John Lawrence of New York City. This caller said he was executive secretary of the Clemency Committee for Sirhan, and that Los Angeles criminal attorneys are all crooks and will take Sirhan, quote, down the river. He also said, quote, "We are out to get Mr. Parsons," and claimed that Parsons was being paid $150,000, that was a lot of money in 1968, to represent Sirhan. He said that there are 250,000 Arabs who are militant and who are not going to let Parsons, quote, get away with it. Parsons contacted the Los Angeles Police Department and immediately requested protection. The police suggested that he discuss the matter with the presiding judge, Los Angeles County Superior Court. The presiding judge intends to hold a hearing to determine if Parsons needs protection. And here is another interesting diary entry that was found at Sirhan's home. On this page, he writes over and over and over, "Kennedy must fall. Kennedy must fall. Senator R. Kennedy must be disposed of. We believe," I don't know who we is, but he refers to we quite a bit. "We believe that Robert F. Kennedy must be sacrificed for the cause of the poor, exploited people. We believe that we can effect such action and produce such results. The hand that is writing, that is doing this writing, is going to do the slaying of the above-mentioned victim. One wonders what it feels like to do any assassination that might do some illegal work. I know that doesn't make any sense, but a lot of Sirhan's diary entries just don't make any sense. And then it says at the bottom of the page, many times over, Kennedy must die, Kennedy must fall, Kennedy must fall, Kennedy must fall. Another page here from Sirhan's diary. These are undated entries, but they're obviously before the assassination, where he writes about his plans to do away with American leaders. Again, from the president to Vice President Hubert Humphrey to UN Ambassador Goldberg, in addition to Senator Robert Kennedy, all because of their support for Israel. And here he's raging about what we're doing in Vietnam, how the economy is just based on war spending and all of these various complaints. And he says, well, my solution to this type of government is that to do away with its leaders and declare anarchy. On the day that Senator Kennedy was shot, the actress Shelley Winters sent this telegram to President Johnson requesting that the alleged assassin be carefully protected, obviously fearing another Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby situation. She writes, Dear President, as you know, I have worked very hard as a dedicated Democrat all my adult life, and I urge you to make the protection of the assailant of Robert Kennedy a national matter and not a city or state concern. Sincerely, Shelley Winters. Little did she know then that Sirhan was her neighbor in Pasadena. And this document was found at Sirhan's home in Pasadena. I think it was actually found in the trash dumpster outside, where someone, maybe someone in his family, had tried to hide it or dispose of it before a search warrant was actually obtained. And in fact, the Sirhan family later protested that search, saying that the police did not have a warrant when they showed up the next day. But the police, and this argument won with the judge, they said that, that someone in the Sirhan family, apparently one of Sirhan's brothers, gave the police permission to enter and search the premises. This particular document actually is not a new discovery. It was evidence presented at his 1969 trial and then publicly released in 1988. So this was in the California State Archives, but it's pretty damning evidence. It is an envelope, as you can see, from the IRS. And he wrote, and that's his handwriting, on the envelope, RFK must be disposed of like his brother was.